The wind had been restless all week, scouring the plains like a dog searching for what had long since died. Dust rose in thin ghosts across the dry earth, painting the morning sky with an ochre haze. Jefferson Black stood at the edge of his porch, one hand curled around a tin cup gone cool with coffee, the other resting on the handle of a shovel he hadn't touched in days. A man didn't rush chores in Sable Creek. The land worked slow. So did he. Behind the barn, something moved. Grady narrowed his eyes. At first, he thought it was one of the feral dogs that sometimes came sniffing around the hayloft for warmth or meat. But this one wasn't four-legged. Too small for a grown person. Too still for a child playing. He set the cup down and walked slow, not wanting to startle whatever it was. She crouched low behind a rusted trough, chewing on a half-rotten peach that must have rolled from last week's crate, one he'd meant to toss but hadn't. Her hands were more bone than skin, fingernails cracked and blackened. Her hair was a matted halo of dust and grease, and her eyes flicked up at him like a cornered animal's. She didn't run. "You hungry?" Grady asked. She didn't answer. He pulled off his coat, weather-beaten, gray with years of sun and storm, and held it out. "Come in." She hesitated. Eyes searched his face, as if looking for a trap, a lie, a flash of cruelty. Then slowly she stood. Not a girl exactly, not a woman either. Young enough to still carry fear like a second skin, but old enough to have seen more than a child should. She took the coat, but didn't put it on. She followed him, silent as a prayer. Inside the cabin, Grady stoked a fire and set water to boil. The girl sat near the hearth, legs tucked under her, eyes scanning the room, walls of pine, a cracked window, a rifle above the mantel. No photographs save one, a woman with a kind face and a boy no older than 10. Neither smiled. Neither lived. He didn't speak much. Never had. After the war, after the cattle drives, after burying his wife and watching his only boy vanish into a grave he'd never seen, words felt like wasted bullets. But he cooked cornbread, beans, a single egg, and slid the plate her way. She devoured it with both hands, like someone who thought the meal might disappear before she finished. "Got a name?" he asked. She chewed, swallowed, licked the plate. "No." Grady leaned back in his chair, nodding once. It wasn't the truth, but it wasn't a lie either. She'd speak when she was ready. Or not. Either way, it wasn't his business unless she made it so. The storm broke that night. Rain came heavy, drumming the tin roof like hooves on hardpan. Grady woke once to the creak of floorboards. The girl had moved to the corner nearest the door, blanket wrapped tight around her, a knife in her hand. Her eyes met his in the dark. He didn't ask where she'd gotten the blade. Didn't need to. Every mile out here came with something sharp. By morning, the rain had gone, but the air held that strange stillness that came after too much quiet. Grady worked the fence line while she shadowed him, never speaking, never straying. When a post leaned, she propped it. When a rail cracked, she patched it with scrap. Her hands knew labor. Her silence knew pain. On the third day, he found her standing over the broken windmill, her fingers tracing the rusted gear like it was scripture. She looked up and said, "You got oil." He handed her the tin without a word. She fixed the mill before sundown. He didn't ask how she knew what she knew. That evening, she rode one of his horses, bareback, no reins, just palms on the mane and knees to guide. The mare bayed like she'd known her for years. Grady watched from the porch, pipe cold in his teeth. "Your daughter?" the shopkeeper asked 2 days later, when Grady came in for salt and lamp oil. Grady paused. "No." The man shrugged. "Could have fooled me." Back at the cabin, she was splitting kindling with a hatchet older than her. One swing clean, then another. Precise. Methodical. "Where you from?" Grady asked that night. She didn't look up. "Doesn't matter." He nodded. They sat in silence, fire crackling low, shadows dancing on old walls. It was enough. It had to be. But on the 5th day, just before sunset, a rider came. Grady saw him from the ridge, tall, thin, dressed in black with a preacher's wide-brim hat and a pale horse that barely made a sound. 3 more riders followed, slower, heavier. Dust trailed them like smoke. They stopped at his gate. The man in black dismounted. Knocked once on the porch rail. Didn't smile when Grady opened the door. "Evening," he said. Voice slick as river stone. "Name's Brother Cass. Looking for someone." Grady stared. "Little girl," Cass continued. "Young. Wild. Ran from Grace. I shepherd lost ones. She belongs with us." Grady didn't blink. "Ain't seen anyone." Cass tipped his hat. "That's so." Grady said nothing. The riders turned without argument, but camped by the creek that night, close enough to smell the chimney smoke. Grady sat by the fire, oiling his old rifle with slow, steady hands. The girl didn't ask. She just watched, knife still tucked at her side. "What did you do?" he finally asked. Her voice was low, but steady. "Survived." He didn't push. Outside, thunder growled again, low and distant. Inside, the silence between them thickened, and the wind, always listening, paused. The girl's name came out on the 7th day, spoken not in confidence but exhaustion. She was bent over a half-broken yoke in the shed, sleeves rolled up past her elbows, her hands black with grease. Grady passed her a clamp without asking. She took it, nodded once, and said, "Lena." It hung in the air for a moment, soft and thin, a name worn down by too much forgetting. Grady didn't repeat it. He simply tucked it away like a coin he might need someday. That evening, she ate slower than usual, not from fear, but thought. She watched the fire like it might speak, and when she finally turned to him, her eyes were calm. "Why'd you let me in?" Grady chewed a piece of cornbread and swallowed. "Didn't seem right, leaving you to rot." She studied him. "I've been left before." "Not by me." No more was said. Over the next few days, Lena became part of the place. She didn't ask permission. She simply moved, feeding the mule, stitching the sag in the porch screen, clearing the dry brush by the smokehouse. She never smiled, but she stopped flinching when the wind slammed the shutters. Grady watched her the way old men watch weather, attuned to the smallest shifts. He saw how she always walked with her back to walls, how she checked the latch on the door twice before bed, how she never let her knife stray more than arm's reach. She didn't trust him. Not fully. But she'd stopped running. She reminded him of someone he couldn't quite name. Maybe his boy, maybe himself. It was Lena who saw the tracks near the edge of the property 2 mornings later. Grady had missed them, his eyes dulled by routine. But she crouched low by the ash-blown ground, her fingers brushing the bent grass. "4 horses," she said. "Same ones." Grady knelt beside her. The prints were shallow recent. No brands in the hoof marks, no wagon drag, just riders moving light and quick. "They're watching," she said. He stood and looked out toward the ridge, where the canyon's edge split the horizon like a jagged blade. Nothing moved out there. But that meant little. That night, she sat closer to the fire than usual, her knees drawn to her chest. Grady waited. "He's not a preacher," she said. "Didn't think so. Calls himself Brother Cass. Says he's God's mouthpiece, but he's just a thief with a Bible." Grady stared at the flames. "My mother thought he could save us," Lena went on. "After my pa died in the mines, she got sick in the head. Thought suffering meant holiness. Let Cass take us in. Called his gang a family. They preached during the day. Whipped at night. Said we were being cleansed." Her voice didn't shake. "I ran. He doesn't like being told no." Grady sat back, pipe in hand, empty of tobacco. He didn't speak. "I stabbed one of them," she added, almost as an afterthought. "Don't know if he lived." Silence filled the cabin like smoke. Grady stood, opened the chest by the hearth. Inside, a faded coat, a revolver wrapped in oilcloth, a silver star dulled with time. He took none of them, only closed the lid. "You planning to hand me over?" Lena asked, voice flat. "No, even if they offer money." "Especially then." She said nothing for a long while. "I didn't want to kill him," she murmured, "but I would again." Grady looked at her. "Then you did what you had to." She stared at him, wary, measuring. Then she nodded. The riders didn't come the next day, or the day after, but smoke curled from the creek bed each evening, and sometimes, just as dusk dipped low, they saw a glint on the ridge, glass, maybe, or steel. Watching, Grady began making small changes. He reset the trap lines along the north trail, dug out the buckshot from the root cellar, repaired the latch on the storm door. Quiet preparations, like a man sweeping the floor before a storm. Lena followed his lead. Without being told, she gathered dried meat into sacks, counted the cartridges, cleaned the spare rifle. She still didn't smile, but her eyes held a clarity now, readiness. That night, Grady handed her his old revolver. It was too big for her hand, but she held it steady. "Ever shoot one of these?" he asked. She cocked the hammer with a practiced thumb. "Once." He nodded. "That's enough." The days pressed in tighter, the air sharpening with that strange, waiting stillness. Each evening, the rider's fire glowed a little closer. Lena grew more silent, but not with fear, with focus. It was 3 nights later when a stone hit the window. Not hard enough to break it, just enough to announce. Grady stood, rifle in hand, and opened the door. Brother Cass waited at the edge of the porch, shadow stretching long behind him. His coat was spotless, boots polished, hands folded as if in prayer. "She's here," he said. "We know it." Grady didn't answer. "She's taken something sacred from us," Cass continued, voice like honey poured over rot. "We only want what's owed." "She's a child," Grady said. "She's a thief," Cass replied, "and a murderer. You made her that." Cass's eyes flicked with something too quick to name. "Don't pretend you're a savior. You think hiding in this shack makes you righteous? I've buried men for less." Grady stepped down off the porch. He didn't raise his voice. "Then bury one more." For a moment, no one moved. Then Cass smiled slow, indulgent, like a man humoring a dog that's lost its teeth. "You've got until sunset tomorrow," he said. "After that, we come and take her." He turned, whistled once, and 3 riders emerged from the dark beyond the trees. Silent, watching, then gone. Grady shut the door. Inside, Lena stood by the fire, rifle in hand. "They won't stop," she said. "No." She looked at him. "Will you?" Grady looked at her then. Really looked. She wasn't trembling. She wasn't asking to be protected. She was asking to be believed. "No," he said. "I won't." Outside, the wind picked up. Inside, the clock ticked louder than it should. And in the dark between them, something old stirred awake, something that had slept too long beneath dust and silence. At dawn, Sable Ridge loomed like a sleeping god, its red cliffs catching the first gold light as if lit from within. Below it, the land sloped down in waves of brush and stone, broken only by a narrow gulch choked with mesquite. Grady stood at the edge of it, his breath turning to fog, a rifle slung across his back. Lena knelt beside him, scanning the ridgeline. "They're moving," she said quietly, for silhouettes had appeared like smudges against the rock. One stayed high, watching, probably Cass. The others fanned out, slow and patient, like hounds circling a den. Grady adjusted the brim of his hat and checked the revolver at his hip. "They're hurting us," Lena said. "Let 'em try." He looked down at her, hair tied back, face streaked with dust, eyes steady. She wore the coat he'd given her days ago. It hung too loose on her, but somehow fit all the same. He didn't say it, but he saw it now. She wasn't a runaway. She was a survivor. They moved into the gulch. Narrow and twisted. It was the kind of place only someone born desperate would trust. But Grady had walked it before, back when he still believed his son might come home. There were places here where a man could disappear, and places where he could strike. Lena pointed to a break in the wall. "There. If we post up above, we'll see him coming through the choke." Grady nodded. "You take the high spot. I'll stay low." They parted without another word. By midday, the canyon boiled with heat. Shadows shrank. The wind died. All that remained was the hiss of dry grass and the distant flap of a crow's wings. Grady crouched behind a boulder, fingers tight on the rifle's grip, sweat crawling down his spine. Then he heard it, the soft jangle of tack. Boots on stone. One rider easing down the gulch alone. Grady waited. The man was broad, face hidden under a scarf, shotgun loose in his hand. He walked like someone who thought fear made him invincible. As he passed, Grady stepped out from behind the stone, pressed the barrel to the man's back. "Drop it," The outlaw froze. I said drop it. The gun hit the ground. Kick it forward. He obeyed. Grady moved fast, stripped the man's belt, tied his hands with his own rope. He hauled him to the side, wedged him behind a boulder. That's one, Grady muttered. Above, a shot rang out. Then another. Grady looked up. A puff of dust lifted near the edge of the gulch wall. Lena. He scrambled up the slope, rifle swinging behind him. As he reached the top, he saw her crouched behind a rock, one eye squinting down the barrel of her revolver. One down, she said. Grady glanced over the ridge. Another man lay sprawled below, face down, rifle beside him. You all right? He asked. She nodded, but her breathing was tight. They're circling back. That shot called him in. Grady ducked as another bullet zipped past, chewing bark from a juniper tree inches from his head. They're not flanking, Lena said. They're driving us upward. Cass wants to corner us, Grady said. Make us run where he can watch. Then let's give him a show. They slipped along the ridge line, moving east toward a rise where the gulch widened briefly before narrowing into a throat of jagged rock. If they held it, they could stop 3 men with half the firepower. Maybe. By the time they reached it, the sun was past its peak. Heat shimmered off the canyon walls. Then came voices, low, confident, too close. Careful now, someone called. We don't want her dead. Lena's jaw tightened. They waited until the first outlaw stepped into the pass. He was grinning. His rifle was up but loose. Grady fired first. The man dropped, stunned before he hit the ground. A second came running, firing wild. Lena crouched, aimed, and shot once. The man crumpled beside the first, a ragged curse dying on his lips. Then came silence. Grady scanned the rocks. Cass, Lena whispered. He didn't reply. He's waiting. Grady knew it too. Cass wouldn't come in shouting. He'd wait. Let fear do the work. Try to turn the silence into pressure. Then a voice, calm and cutting, echoed down from above. Well now, the little snake found herself a fanged friend. Grady stood slowly, eyes searching the cliffs. You're outnumbered, Cass. Maybe. But I've got time. You. Not so much. Girls wanted dead by sunrise. Preacher's word. You wouldn't stand against the word of God, would you, lawman? Grady flinched. Cass laughed. Oh yes, he said. I know who you are. Jefferson Black. Sheriff turned grave digger. Tell me, what tombstone you gonna carve for this one? Lena stepped forward, gun raised. You talk too much. The shot cracked across the gulch. Cass ducked behind cover just in time, her bullet sparking off stone inches from his head. You'll regret that, he snarled. No, she said. I won't. Grady pulled her back. He'll push now, he said. He won't forgive that. So we make it count. The last rider came at dusk, storming down the gulch with fury in every step. Grady and Lena both fired. The dust swallowed his fall. Then it was just Cass. He stepped into view like a shadow given shape, twin pistols drawn, eyes shining with rage. Last chance, he called. Hand her over. Grady stepped beside Lena. No. Cass aimed. So did they. 3 shots rang out. Only 2 found their mark. Cass dropped to his knees, blood blooming at his shoulder. He tried to raise his pistol, but Lena was already on him, revolver pressed to his chest. Please, he rasped. She didn't fire. She looked at Grady. He met her eyes, and nodded. They left Cass alive. Grady bound the preacher with the last of the rope, hands tight behind his back, mouth stuffed with torn cloth. Not out of mercy, out of choice. Lena stood nearby, gun still warm in her grip, eyes fixed on Cass like she was memorizing every line of his face. Not from fear now, but understanding. He had no more power here. You sure? Grady asked. Lena nodded. Let him crawl. Let the desert do the rest. By morning, the canyon was quiet again. The wind returned, brushing the rocks clean. Buzzards circled, lazy in the heat. Grady and Lena packed slow, deliberate. Their silence wasn't heavy, it was earned. They buried the 2 outlaws by the dry creek. No words, no markers, just stones on the chest and dirt over the eyes. The third, the one Grady had caught, was long gone by the time they checked the boulder. The rope had been cut, bloodied at the knot. He'd left his belt behind. That was all. You think he'll run back to them? Lena asked. Maybe. Maybe not. Some men only need one chance to change. She considered that. Back at the cabin, things looked smaller somehow. The porch sagged a little more. The mule brayed, hungry and unimpressed. The morning sun caught on the broken barn window like a wound. Grady stood in the doorway, watching Lena gather her things. She moved with purpose, the same way she had when she'd first cleaned the soot from his stovetop, quiet, determined, precise. But now there was something new under it all. Not weight, direction. You leaving? He asked. Lena turned. Her bag was small, just enough to carry water, food, and a revolver tucked under her coat. I think I have to, she said. They'll keep coming. Others. Cass's friends. You could stay. She hesitated, then looked out past the fence line. I need to know who I am when I'm not running. Grady nodded once, slowly. There's a town down past Echo Ridge, he said. Law runs decent there. Sheriff might listen. I'm not looking for courts. No, but you might find peace. She slung the bag over her shoulder. What about you? He smiled just barely. Got a fence to finish. A roof to patch. Maybe even a barn to mend. She walked to him, hesitated, then placed something in his hand. It was her knife, the same one she'd kept hidden behind her belt from the first night. The handle worn, blade clean. Don't need it anymore, she said. He looked down at it, then up at her. You will, he replied. Take it. She did, and she smiled, small, crooked, the kind that doesn't show teeth, but says everything worth saying. Then she turned and walked east. Grady watched until she was a blur in the morning heat. He stood there long after she vanished, listening to the wind, the mule, the creak of the old house behind him. It felt like a page had turned without his hand moving. A good one, though. One he'd reread someday. Weeks passed. He heard whispers, through passing traders, from the widow in town who delivered dried peaches and news. A girl had shot a bounty hunter in Calhoun County. Rode out clean. A girl had stopped a coach robbery north of Dry Pass. Disappeared before sunrise. A girl had helped bring down a preacher's ring in New Mexico territory. No one knew her name. Grady did. He never said it. Instead, he started carving again, wood figures, like he used to when his son was small. First a crow, then a snake. Then, one evening, a figure in a long coat, hair pulled back, a knife in one hand. He didn't finish the face. That night, he lit the lamp, stepped out onto the porch, and looked at the stars. They hung low and close, just the way they used to in stories. The air was sharp, the kind that told of coming change. Somewhere out there, she was writing her own tale. Not in ink, not in fire, but in footsteps, in choices. Dust always settles. But names? Names remain.